Right, we're good. We're good. Sound okay at the back? Over here? Yeah. Cool. Isn't this the perfect gift for vibe coding? I do actually look like this when I'm vibe coding as well. Although I did realise more and more people are not typing, they're actually just talking into a phone or talking into a microphone. So you'll notice I've got a kind of provocative title there, Time We Get Over Ourselves. I think you might figure out why I've put that as we go through, so I won't give it away just now. This is the squeakiest floor in the world. Okay, cool. So I'm not a massive narcissist, but I think my profile is important just to give the context of why I know a little bit about vibe coding, why I think it's an interesting subject. So James referred to me as a product manager, it's fine. I would say more product person. I'm slightly more flexible than product manager. I've just started my own company with a few other founders. So I suppose I am the product manager of that group. But I think what's important is I'm not a coder, I don't write code. I've given myself 32 out of 100 because I can sort of read pseudocode and I've copied and pasted HTML here and there and I've built stuff, but I've never learned a programming language. I signed up for a 100-hour course one day and I got into like 1 hour of it. Just not my cup of tea, okay? Bigger on the soft skills, so I'm okay with talking to people, experimentation, very keen on that. Know a little bit about user experience, relatively low on patience, okay? So that in mind, this is why vibe coding is a really good fit for me, and it may be a good fit for you as well. So this word vibe coding, this term vibe coding, I was like, how the hell did we end up here? Like, I was using, ChatGPT and all the rest of it to write code and, like I said, copy and paste it to build my own apps and pages. But I was like, how do we come to this term? So this is a bit of fun. It's the lineage of vibe coding. So it starts with the first programs. So clever lady working for a relatively clever man starts to program. It's not called coding at this point. A bit later, the vibraphone is born. I don't know if you've never heard a vibraphone, go on YouTube and listen to it. You'll recognize it, and it's really cool, nice sound. So the vibraphone was sort of called the Vibes and shortened to Vibes. Sort of real code kind of starts getting born, and we start to talk about coding. First, this is like physical changes to knobs and dials and buttons, and then becomes software later on. The Beach Boys. They love vibrations and they get very excited about that word. They popularise the word vibrations. People say good vibes a lot. Software becomes a thing. Now it's probably the most important thing, the most dangerous and scary thing. So software becomes important. Cool people ruin stuff. So the word vibes gets taken over by very cool trap artists. I wanted to play some trap music that had the word vibes in. Let's just say the expletives meant that wasn't possible and the fact that we didn't have sound. But yeah, you can do that research in your own time. ChatGPT comes along. So I think we could have put Claude or ChatGPT up here, but the coding models just tip over that threshold where you can actually, within a few prompts, get really good code. And that sort of, you'll all have different opinions. That happened around 2023 when ChatGPT 4 came out. And Sonnet came out from Claude around the same time. And then what happened is, clever people went, I know what we'll do. We'll put a wrap around that. We'll call it something like Lovable, and we'll make it available to everyone. And so essentially, vibe coding tools started to emerge as sort of wrappers around these coding models, which were much more accessible to the likes of me and people with even less technical knowledge than me, that wanted to start playing around and writing apps. And then finally, Andre Karpathy, he was a co-founder of OpenAI, he's not there anymore, he came up with the term vibe coding, okay? He actually said, vibe coding is when you fully give in to the vibes, express the exponentials, forget the code even exists, okay? And that's quite interesting because when you speak to people that use vibe coding apps, they're not forgetting, they don't really know the code exists, they're not really aware of what all of that infrastructure and all that code that's running underneath their apps. And then I didn't actually know this, found this during my research. It was the word of the year in 2025 according to Collins Dictionary. I challenge whether it's one word. I think it's 2 words, but we won't get into that. If you've put your hand up if you've used one of these tools, really keen to see. So I've got Lovable, Bolt, Replit, Claude, Cursor. Might be easier. Put your hand up if you've not used one of these tools. We've got 1, we've got 2. Anyone else brave enough? Yeah, okay, a couple of people. Just out of interest, not heard of them, not bothered? Yeah. Codex? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I put these in order of sort of most viable. So Lovable is kind of the one that really has swept the market. They've got crazy statistics. They've really taken the sort of the vibe coding audience with a storm. But that said, you can obviously vibe code in all of these tools, and as you go down, you kind of get more visibility and more transparency into the code you're creating. You don't have to look at it, but obviously you can. So I'd encourage you, depending on where you are, so like if you're the kind of person that likes to work in the IDE and write and see the code, I would encourage you to take a couple of steps up and go and look at some of these. And equally, if you're someone who operates in Lovable, take a couple of steps down because you'll learn something. So I've got a very technical co-founder, and he was amazed by the speed at which Lovable could make changes and deploy them and make them available on a URL. And I was like, but this is it. This is the reason people love vibe coding, because those changes are available instantly and I can share them instantly. And we'll get into that in a minute. The impact is starting to be like measurable. So these numbers are wishy-washy and obviously changing all the time. GitHub reckons year on year there's been a 14x growth. This was weekly commits from 90 million to 275 million. And that's just the people that are sort of committing code to GitHub. That probably does include Lovable, but not everyone's actually committing code. There's a lot of code being written. There's prototypes that never actually makes it into Git. So it is an insane amount of growth. The amount of code that's out in the wild is just accelerating at such pace. Again, another stat from GitHub. I'm sure you could probably challenge it, but looks like a new developer joins GitHub every second. So, this is, if you look at the numbers, it looks like there's double the rate of developers joining year on year. So last year, I think there was double the number of developers that there was last year. So this is, again, huge growth. But it has some problems. And I'm sure some of you more technical people in the room are already thinking, well, yeah, but it breaks shit and it's not secure. And you'd be right. There's some pretty good research. This was just one study I found for you. That suggests that 50% of AI-generated files ship with security flaws. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's pretty scary. But then I'm sure a lot of the human-generated files ship with security flaws. So you'd really need to know what that number was to sort of make a judgment. So that's kind of vibe coding, that's what it is, and that's the impact it's having. Just jog on, there's a million clicks on this. What did people say? Well, I, as a product person, I've had exposure to, engineering sort of critics that have said, well, you're just creating slop. Say like a front-end designer might say, front-end engineer might say, well, everything's going to look the same. And, it's all purple with AI and synergy and all this sort of stuff. And you'd be right. Sometimes it does. How do you know it's secure? Well, we've just proven some people don't. We're shipping stuff that's not secure. And wait until it breaks in production. Like, yeah, this stuff does break in production. We were vibe coding something today, or we were writing something very quickly today. The happy path worked beautifully. I pressed enter on an input on a form, and it just blew up. So it looked beautiful, but it just functionally wasn't quite ready. So those skeptics, they're not wrong. The converts, like the people promoting it, I suppose a little bit like me. They're saying things like, oh, look, I built this thing in 20 minutes, or I rebuilt Slack in a day, and I don't need engineers anymore. And like, these are real things. I've kind of paraphrased stuff that's on LinkedIn, but if you scroll LinkedIn, you're going to see both sides of this story. And I don't know if any of you feel like this in the room, but there's quite a big group of people that are conflicted, right? This is a really scary time, and I think we all need to just stop and take a look and think about what is our role going forward? You're all here because you're interested in AI, you're playing around with AI, you're on board to a degree, but we've really got to take a look at what is the future look like. I've spoken to people that say, I love coding, it's therapeutic, I get in the zone and I get into flow. That's a lot harder when you're just like chatting with a chatbot, you feel a bit less like you're creative. So, again, that's just really opinions, the splash it's made. But something that I've really noticed is the process of taking an idea or a problem through to delivery is definitely changing. Like, it has to change. One, because we can build a lot faster, but two, because the time it takes to go from, I've got an idea to actually seeing if that idea has value for a customer has just compressed by 5 to 10 times. Even building prototypes takes a long time. I don't know if any of you have used Figma and tried to build like realistic, meaningful prototypes that you can give to a customer. It's a pain in the ass. It's really difficult. Now you can build reasonable prototypes very quickly and start to get that feedback. So the process has to change. And with that, we need to make sure that we are solving the right problems. So I've seen a pattern of, okay, I can build a thing, so I'm going to build it and I'm going to put it out in the wild. And it's like, okay, well, you built a solution, but did we spend enough time going over, is this the right problem? Are we solving for the right pain points? Users are very quick to say, yes, I love that feature, that's nice, that's important to me. But how important is it compared to everything else in their world and all the other problems they've got? So this is the risk. It's like, now we can build really fast. So we used to do lots of discovery to make sure when we spent that engineering time, it was well spent. But now the engineering time's like, well, we can compress that quite a lot. 3 times, 5 times, maybe 10 times faster if we're lucky. So now we can build more stuff. But that means, we can build ourselves really into the wrong direction. We can build lots of different things in the wrong direction. So this is the insight for me is, if you're working, if you are a product person or you're working with product people who are saying, hey, we need to go and build this, making sure we've spent that time checking the problem space, making sure that this is a real problem, people care about it. So discovery, so in case everyone's not familiar with the term discovery is what the term we use to describe the act of figuring out what problems we should solve and how should we solve them. You'll see that this is like quite an old model for like an approach to discovery. You could go on LinkedIn or Mind the Product website and find 20 other frameworks for doing discovery. I just use this one because people are quite familiar with it. But essentially, discovery is how do we figure out what to build, and then delivery is how do we build it and getting the engineering over the line. So the old way of discovery is kind of like we spend a lot of time having conversations, we do interviews, we talk to different stakeholders, get different opinions, and then it's just kind of like they call it divergent phase, and then we start to hone in on, okay, well, seems like these are the problems. Let's define those problems really acutely. And then we go and knock on the engineering team's door and say, hey, we want to build this thing. We've got some evidence. This is important. Let's go build it. And then the engineers go, well, you want all that? That's going to take like 3 months. And you want it in 2 weeks. So then you cut the scope, and then you might deliver something. And I say might because I've worked in enough teams that don't deliver anything. And that's a problem, we have to fix it. But yeah, we deliver something. So this new way, it's kind of weird because what you're going to have is you're going to have product people going, well, yeah, I've had a chat, we've discussed the problems, and actually I can put in front of a customer now a very realistic solution in the form of a prototype, and I can actually give that customer and have them start using it. Maybe I'll put some demo data in, put some dummy data in there, they can start playing around, and then they're going to give me feedback on my prototype. So at this point, we're really, really expediting that initial phase of interviews and, should it look like this and should it look like that. I'm not saying this is a good thing, but I am saying this is what's going to happen because it's too tempting. even, I don't know, some of you might work in organizations where, we have to convince stakeholders what we're doing and why we're doing it. In fact, that's usually, as hard as convincing engineering teams, this is what we should build. And stakeholders want to see the thing. They want to see, what am I, we're going to spend 3 months building this thing. What am I getting for my money? So the prototype, the excitement around these prototypes is there, and you're going to just be, if you work as an engineer or you work in design, you're going to be overwhelmed with them. This is what's going to happen. However, this is also a really powerful tool, and I'm just going to show you one example of how we've sort of used this idea of like build something quickly first, use it to learn, and then go into hardened engineering. So if this works, you probably can't see the details of this, but on the right-hand side, this is a really good-looking UI of a legal case management system. So the company I work for, we do legal stuff, we do conveyancing, which is buying and selling houses, and there's a lot of legal work involved. So legal people need a really good case management system to deal with all the documents and the emails and the problems, and that's what this is. This was not built by an engineer. This was built by someone who doesn't know a single line of HTML or anything. This was built in Lovable by our solicitor. And the crazy thing is, I didn't even give her the tool. We were discussing a problem and how should our system look that we're building. And then overnight, she went home and Googled, I don't know, prototype tool or something, found Lovable, got the free account, and just started. She got so far and ran out of credits. And I was like, what you're building is great. Here's some more credits. Have some more credits. And so what really that taught me was I need to get over myself. As the product person, I was like, oh, we're going to have interviews. We're going to do these elaborate sketches. We're going to put Post-its on the wall. We're going to reorder them and choose what we're going to solve. And she just went for it. She was like, this is what I want. This is what I need. So some of you, I'll just dance if that's not. Some of you who've sort of done this activity of discovery will know that you don't just sort of take what someone's asking for and go and build it, even if they give you an elaborate prototype. We still need to challenge, okay, love the prototype, but what problems are we solving here? And so the cool thing about that prototype is it allowed us to have a really good conversation. We can look at the screen and say, why did you put that right at the top? Why did you make it bold? Why did you make it green or red or whatever? We can discuss why has that person chosen to put those things in that way, and it unpicks the problem. The problem is I need to identify who my customer is really quickly if they call me. Okay, makes sense. That's why it's up there. Got it. And so we're kind of going through and challenging them. Something I did with that that prototype we just have on the screen was I took the code and then gave it to Claude and said, reverse engineer the requirements for this prototype. So we've now, instead of saying, okay, what are your requirements, let's go build something, we've said, here's this really elaborate prototype. What requirements does it satisfy? And what problems does that solve for the user? And then we've kind of distilled that right back to a really succinct set of problems and potential solutions. So we're not going to go and keep pointing, there's nothing there. We're not going to... We go. Do you want me to just change the port? One sec.
It's just not seeing anything.
This might wake it up. Oh, here we go. That's my job. Touch screen. Boom! So, I've lost my train of thought now. With this particular prototype, yeah, we distilled it into a set of problems and solutions. And we're not necessarily going to build that exact thing, but some of those components, like they might be good enough to just ship. And other things, like there was an example, I think one was messages. And it was like, yeah, I've just put a little messaging chat window over here. And I was like, that's really fucking complicated. Like messaging, chat, omni-channel, on WhatsApp, email, like that's really complicated. So that's where the engineering comes in to say, well, we may not start with that or we may simplify it. Cool, that's enough about that. Oh, there's an example of like reverse engineering requirements. You can't read it, so I'll skip on. Cool. So what I've described, what we've been talking about so far is kind of just slopping it, right? I didn't manage to grab it, but someone had put on LinkedIn the Nike tick with just slop it, and I thought, yeah, that's great. This is fine. This is fine if we're prototyping. If we're just trying to test stuff quickly, it's a bit chaotic, it's a bit magical. We don't really care about the code. That doesn't matter. What matters is communicating that idea to our audience really quickly. But you will start hearing this term hands up who's heard of this term, agentic coding. Okay, so about half, maybe 40% of the room. So this is like the serious kind of stepbrother and sister to just slopping it, just vibe coding it, agentic coding. This talk is not going to be about agentic coding. That is for someone else. JC, I think that'll be a really good, where have you gone? I think that'll be a good topic for someone else who's a bit more knowledgeable in that area. But at a high level, agentic coding is still using natural language, and it's still using LLMs to write your code, but it's doing it in a much more structured, scalable, and hopefully safe way. To give you an idea, someone who's putting together an agentic coding workflow is going to want to think about, what does my tool, whether it's Claude or whoever else, what does my tool have access to in terms of context? So this is a screen grab of one example of how you can set up your Claude folder to give it access to all of the different context it would need to write much better code than if you were just slopping it and you were just going straight at it. So it has things like, what should the tone of voice be? What should the UX look and feel be? What's the database language? What are the different methods we can and can't use? All these things, security principles. If you're an engineer and you're starting to dabble, make sure you start figuring out, okay, what does our agentic coding workflow look like? For sure, your company or whoever you work for is going to expect increased output with AI, and agentic coding is how you get it. That's how you actually get hardened code over the line. I'm not saying it's flawless. We've been doing this in our company, and like I said, we've found issues still. But every time we find those issues, we're able to adjust this. We're able to adjust this sort of background, context, and plan, and things get better. Cool. So, this is kind of the same thing, but first off, vibe coding, like whatever your opinions, it's happening and people are going to do it, and it's a good thing. And we need to just figure out, how do we deploy it properly in our organization? And then, the serious older brother of it is this agentic coding. And we need to be mindful, which approach are we going to use? If we're doing those prototypes and we're exploring ideas, we're probably in the vibe coding territory. If we're starting to think about building experiments that customer data will go into, we probably want to be thinking about using the agentic coding approach. So with that, I would just say there's a few things worth asking. I'll just put them on the screen. So, think about it. Are you really getting the benefit of vibe coding today? Because if you're not, and you work in a competitive environment, probably your competitors are. Are you opening the door for non-technical people? So it's been kind of easy for a while to say, don't you worry about designing anything. I'm the product person, I'm the product designer. I'll take your requirements, I'll go figure it out. I don't think that's the right approach. I think you should say, go build me a thing and we'll talk about it. And then finally, are you ready to get over yourself? The reason I started here with we need to get over ourselves is, this is really difficult. If you are experienced, if you've got a craft, whether you're an engineer, 20 years writing the same language, or you're a designer that's created beautiful products by hand, or you're a product person who you kind of pride yourself on your ability to understand problems and carve the right path through them, you have to get over yourself, because you're going to have to hand some of this stuff off to AI. And that's just the way it is. So the quicker you make that, this is my opinion, the quicker you make that switch, the better, and you're going to have a better time. And with that, I'm just going to do some shameless self-promotion. I work for Koala. We help you buy and sell houses. So if you're buying or selling a house, come to koala.legal. get a quote, and you might even speak to me. That's it. Thank you very much.